This is the audience.
Imagine a sport so intense where players skate over 20 miles per hour while controlling a tiny puck in front of millions of fans worldwide. That sport is hockey, and the NHL, also known as the National Hockey League, is its biggest stage. What started as a small league in Canada has turned into one of the most well-known sports organizations in the world. Even if you're not interested in hockey, you've probably heard of teams like the Chicago Blackhawks, the New York Rangers, the Nashville Predators, or maybe you've heard of famous names like Wayne Gretzky or Sidney Crosby. You've heard of these teams and names because hockey has become such a big part of sports and entertainment culture across the US and beyond. If you haven't been able to tell already, hockey is a sport I'm really passionate about and have been around my whole life. But sadly, not a lot of people know the unique and fascinating history behind the NHL. So today, I'm going to be informing you about the beginnings of the NHL, how the NHL has expanded and evolved over time, and the impact it has had on today's sports and culture. So first, I'm going to talk about how the NHL began. So the NHL was first created in 1917 in Montreal, Canada, with only 4 teams. Yes, only 4 teams. Nobody would have predicted back then that that small 4-team league would turn into the organization it is now. But even back then, people were really passionate about hockey because it had become such an essential part of Canadian culture. So as hockey became more and more popular, it entered into what we can call now the Original Six era. The Original Six era consisted of these 6 teams: the Montreal Canadiens, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Boston Bruins, the Chicago Blackhawks, the Detroit Red Wings, and the New York Rangers. These 6 teams basically defined professional hockey during their time. And all the rivalries and traditions that fans still practice today started with these 6 teams during this era. For example, the rivalry between the Montreal Canadiens and the Toronto Maple Leafs. So even though the league started off small, it quickly expanded. Next, I'm going to talk about how the NHL has expanded and evolved over time. So the NHL stayed relatively small for a while, but in 1967, the team switched from 6 teams to 12 teams. Now this was a major turning point in hockey, because hockey was no longer centered in Canada or northern US cities. It was starting to spread all over the United States. And it kept spreading to where we now have 32 teams in the league, even in places you wouldn't necessarily think would be associated with hockey. For example, Florida has 2 teams, Nevada has a team, Texas has a team. And the NHL wasn't only spreading across the US, it was also spreading internationally, globally. Players were moving from Sweden, Russia, and all other countries to the United States to play in the National Hockey League. That just goes to show how big the organization had become. The game itself was also evolving. New rules and establishments were being added to make the game safer and more enjoyable for the fans. Now, what do I mean when I say more enjoyable for the fans? Well, for reference, a post in 2025 from the website All Black Hockey Sticks explained how there used to be no glass boarding around the ice rink, so pucks could just come into the fan section spontaneously whenever. So just imagine you're a fan, you're sitting in the fan section, you decide to look down, get a sip of your soda, but at the same time on the ice rink, there's a player who decides to shoot a puck 100 miles per hour, but instead of scoring, it goes past the goalie into the fan section, and you could probably predict what happened next. Yeah, that's why these establishments and rules were put in place. So the NHL, as it was expanding and evolving, it was also having a huge impact on culture today. So lastly, I'm going to talk about the impact the NHL has had on sports and entertainment culture. So the NHL has produced a lot of legendary names that a lot of people know in sports history today. For example, one of the biggest examples is Wayne Gretzky, also known as the Great One, who holds millions of hockey records today that still haven't been passed. Many people refer to him today as the best hockey player of all time. Another example is Sidney Crosby, who served as an inspiration to many of the younger hockey players in the NHL today, and he still inspires a lot of younger players. Another example is Alex Ovechkin. He's one of the older players in the league, but he just passed Wayne Gretzky's record of the most goals by an NHL player in their whole career. If you're wondering what that number is, it is currently 929 goals. It's pretty cool. So not only was the NHL impacting culture by producing these legendary names, but they were also creating huge events that brought lots of audiences together. Some examples are the Winter Classic, the All-Star Weekend, and the Stadium Series. I actually went to the Stadium Series a few years ago. I have my tickets right here. It was against the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Nashville Predators. So today, I've informed you about the beginnings of the NHL, how the NHL has evolved and expanded over time, and its impact that it's had on today's sports and culture. So whether it's the legendary names, the intense rivalries, or just the thrill of it all, the National Hockey League continues to bring large audience together and creates an electric and competitive environment, showing just how much hockey has come in the past century. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
You mentioned Alex Ovechkin set the goal record, beating Wayne Gretzky. What was Wayne Gretzky's goal record?
Yes, that number was 894 goals. Any other questions?
I do. And does Wayne Gretzky still play in the league today?
He does not. He actually retired a few years back, I believe around his 40s or 30s. He's now in his mid-60s and he acts as an NHL commentator. Any more questions? Thank you.